Hi YouTube, it's Kathy and this is my weekly entertainment wrap-up for January 15th through 21st. This week I read 3 books, I watched 2 shows, I watched 4 movies, and I listened to 1 book. First this week I read a non-fiction book. The first part of the title is Bi. The subtitle is The Hidden Culture, History, and Science of Bisexuality by Julia Shaw. When I try to conceive of what this book was trying to do, I think it was basically trying to be the bisexual version of Ace by Angela Chen, and I think it fell flat in a couple regards. I'd like to point out that I don't think this was bad. It was actually pretty well written. It's written for a general audience, but it definitely left out a few things here and there. And to have it be at par with Ace by Angela Chen was what I wanted out of this, and it just didn't quite get there. I know it's probably not fair to compare the two things, but because I am both of these things and I wanted books that represented all of that part of me, I was a little bit let down by the fact that this book doesn't really discuss people who are both bi and ace, where I'm pretty sure that Ace actually discussed that. This book also didn't really talk about people under the non-binary or genderqueer umbrella, and that is also a little bit of a problem. It did point out that there's not a lot of research into that, but the author could have made an effort to talk to people and get testimonies of people who fit under that umbrella, so that was another thing that was a little bit of a letdown. This book is exactly what it says on the tin. It's trying to tell you about the history and the culture and what the different things about being bisexual are and go through some different misconceptions and that type of thing. It did seem like it was written for a general audience, and it did an okay job at what it was doing. I didn't hate it, I just wanted more out of it. Next I finished a very short graphic novel that is indie published, so I couldn't even find it on Goodreads, and that's called Planet Ardbeg. Funnily enough, and this doesn't usually happen, it actually happens to be right in front of me. See, it's just wee. It's a wee anthology of 3 different stories that are kind of combined about the 3 different types of Scotch that Ardbeg actually has out, and kind of their origin stories, if you will, but it's done in like a sci-fi format with different artists doing different things, and then there's ads in between and stuff like that. It was kind of fun. This is the first issue. I think they're going to do a couple more issues, and it's something that I was originally going to get as a Christmas present from my roommate, but then it showed up late, so she gave it to me as a very, very early birthday present because I will not be in the country for my birthday. This also really makes me want to visit Islay one day because that's where this particular distillery is, and I would love to go there. I've heard it's beautiful. The other book I finished this week is 6 Times We Almost Kissed and the One Time We Did. This is a contemporary romance between these 2 girls whose mothers are best friends. This is also a hard-hitting contemporary because it jumps around on the timeline a bit, and previous to the current timeline, one of their fathers died in a horrific accident that she was also a part of, and her mother went off the rails and has made some questionable decisions. Because their mothers are best friends, these girls have always kind of been in each other's lives, and independently they've had a lot of different hardships. Penny is the character whose father recently died about a year or 2 previous to the main timeline of this plot. And then Tate didn't grow up with a father. She always had a single mother, and she loves her mom, but her mom has also had a lot of health complications. At the beginning of this book, they're both called to a family meeting, and neither of them knows what this means, but they are both very scared that it could mean terrible, terrible things, and I'm not going to tell you what it is, but it definitely sets them up for more anxiety and more pressure and things like that. In addition to all of that, they've always had this tension between them, and if you like a slow burn, this is like the mother of all slow burns because you see all of these different times they almost kissed, and then, you know, the one time they did. And because we're learning about all of these different times, we obviously learn more things about their relationship and their background, and little things about their lives start to click together as we're learning all of this background information. I think this is the 3rd book I've read by this author, and I really enjoyed all of the books that I've ever read by this author. So I'm going to see if there's a backlist of more contemporaries by this author because I would like to read them. I think that she's written some things in some different fandoms, and I don't know if I'm particularly interested in those, but if there's more contemporaries, I want to read them. On to the shows I watched this week, the first one being the final episode of Sherlock, which is the one called The Final Problem. Again, my roommate was rewatching this and her boyfriend was watching it for the first time, and he's one of those people that can guess ahead of time what's going to happen in basically everything he watches, which is slightly infuriating but also very impressive. And there were certain things about this episode that he called in his head ahead of time, and he's one of those people that will tell you afterwards if he called it, but he won't like wreck it by being like, oh, this is gonna happen, this is gonna happen. He's not one of those people, thankfully. He's very nice. I of course have also seen this before, but it's always really interesting to go back even knowing what's going to go on and kind of see how they got to the conclusions they get to. I would definitely not be opposed to them doing more episodes of this show, but obviously the actors are very busy with other projects, and each season is basically 3 movies, so I can completely understand if that never happens. I'm pretty sure nothing is slated to ever happen, but I'd be happy if it did. I also stayed current on season 15 of RuPaul's Drag Race. Episode 4 was the Snatch Game, and they did it so early that there are so many queens left that they actually had to break it up into 2 different Snatch Game panels. When it comes down to who were the bottom 2, I knew this situation was going to happen eventually. If you have contestants like these on your show, you're just going to make them lip sync against each other. That's just how it's going to happen, and it needed to happen because neither of them were very good at this challenge. It's going to be interesting to see how the person who remains goes on in the competition. Also, this show moved to a different platform, and now the episodes are only about 45 minutes instead of an hour, and you can definitely tell they're shorter, and I don't think I like it. On to the movies we watched. We rewatched The Gentleman, which is a movie that takes place in the UK. Matthew McConaughey is a big-time pot dealer, and by that I mean he has a whole drug empire, and he's looking to sell it off. And there's a very interesting plotline that has to do with trying to sell it off, and his wife's business, and this person trying to do some blackmail and some double-crossing, and it's just a fun time. It's just an easy movie to watch since I'd seen it before. Similarly, we also rewatched The Boondock Saints, and there are things in this that, you know, have not aged well at all. Although it is always funny to go into this movie and be like, ah, the person that played Coach Beast on Glee, right there in the beginning of the movie. And the name of the character she played was also really cool, and I can't remember it, but it was like quite the name. Also, occasionally Norman Reedus just talks in his normal voice and doesn't do an Irish accent at all, which is just super weird. And then apparently the guy that plays Rocco is childhood best friends with the director, and this is the first movie he ever did. He's only ever done 5 movies, 2 of them are Boondock Saints movies, and I think he did a pretty good job considering he'd never been in a film before. Also, for some reason Ron Jeremy is in this film, so yeah, there's lots of surprises. If you've never heard of this film before, you don't know what it is. It's 2 brothers that are Irish who live in New York, and some vigilante stuff goes down, and there's a cop trying to figure out who they are, and once he does figure out who they are, he's played by Willem Dafoe, by the way, he is conflicted because he's like, they're taking down the bad guys, but also they're not supposed to be doing it this way. Do I help them? Do I hinder them? What am I gonna do? He is also a super problematic character because he is queer, but he's also homophobic, and I'm just like, what? No. You can just tell when straight white dudes write things and think they're funny. Chad and I also went to the theater to see Black Panther: Wakanda Forever, which was just fantastic. It was such a great adventure. I loved a lot of the action shots. There's a lot that takes place underwater for reasons I'm not going to tell you, and all of that was really interesting. Also, the connotations of what happened in the scene that's partway through the credits, also very interesting to figure out how that's gonna go down in the future. And I really love that the main character of this piece was Princess Shuri, and the whole reasoning why she was the main character, and just kind of all of the things that went on with her and her grieving process and all these different things that were happening in her life. I really thought it was a solid flick. The last movie I watched, I was actually mostly just in the room for and listening to while playing a game on my phone, but it is a 1990s movie called With Honors that stars Brendan Fraser as a guy who is going to Harvard, and while he's there, he's got his thesis, and then his computer crashes, so he goes to make copies of the only copy he has, and he ends up dropping it, and the guy that's been living in the boiler room of the library finds it and starts destroying it, and for him to get it back, he has to do things for this guy, who is played by Joe Pesci, by the way, and it kind of becomes this thing where they become friends, and it changes how his life goes, and you can probably figure out it's probably going to have a sad ending, because of course it's going to have a sad ending. It was one of those things in that regard that was a little bit predictable. I could foresee what they were trying to do with this. Because the main character was doing a thesis on government, there was a lot to do with that in this, and there were some really good monologues to do with that, but there's also just oh my sweet summer child moments where you're like, oh yeah, the future's gonna be so much better because we're gonna use technology to do this, and it's just like, oh no, the characters don't know what has gone on in America since then, so that's fun. Also, for some reason, Patrick Dempsey is in this and looks a lot like David Krumholtz while he's doing it, and that was just weird to look up and see every once in a while. The book I listened to this week is The Light Fantastic by Terry Pratchett. This is the second in the Discworld series and the second book that I'm reading for around the Disc 800. This is another book in the Rincewind sub-series, and even though I didn't really enjoy the first book, this one I enjoyed a lot better. It still had a lot of jumping around and possibly too many characters for for my taste, but it had way more of the whimsy and the world building that I love from Pratchett, so I'm slowly warming up to this. Also knowing that the next book is in a different sub-series and it's a book I've read before and enjoyed before is making me look forward to continuing this project. The Light Fantastic picks up where The Color of Magic left off, and Rincewind and Twoflower are still on this big epic adventure around the disc, but we come to find out that there's a certain event coming up and all of the wizards think that these certain 8 spells need to be said so that the disc isn't destroyed, and one of those spells has been in Rincewind's head since he was trying to be a wizard and then failed out of that school, so there's all this connotation as to whether or not that's going to happen, whether or not they're going to be able to find him, all of those fun things. We're also introduced to even more characters. Some of them were trolls. I really liked how trolls were done in this. We were also introduced to Cohen the Barbarian, and he's in his 80s, so he obviously has this long history of being a barbarian and is still doing it, but he's quite elderly, so there's lots of comedy around that. And just because I know this is such a vast world, I'm looking forward to some of the characters we've met in this book showing up in books way further down the line. That's it for this week. If you've read, watched, or listened to any of these, let me know about it down in the comments below. On the way down to the comments, if you hit that subscribe button, that would be very nice of you. If you don't feel like leaving a comment but want to make sure that I know you were here, just leave me an emoji or a smiley face if you happen to be on your keyboard. Some people have asked if there's a way to financially support this channel, so I set up a Ko-fi account, which is a digital tipping service. The link, as always, is down below. You can like and share this as you see fit, and I will see you very soon. Bye!